celebrating and showcasing extraordinary people who are doing incredible things to make our world a better place. This is Close-Up Television. I'm your host, Jim Masters, and thanks for joining us. On today's episode, we celebrate Naomi Hoshino Horii. Naomi is an intuitive healer and the founder of Holding Light Productions, where she teaches clients how to develop their intuition to heal themselves and others. Naomi believes we're all natural healers, and she's learned how to do it more consciously herself. The tools that she teaches have been so helpful to her in her own life. That's why she feels it's really important for her to share them with anyone who would like to use them for themselves. According to Naomi, when we're in our natural state of love and grace, things will come together in all areas of our life, including our relationships, work, finance, and health. As a healer, psychic, and teacher of 20 years, Naomi offers intuitive healing and reading sessions. She uses techniques for spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional healing that bring you into your wholeness and divinity with love. Naomi teaches her clients how to use their innate vibration of love to rebalance their health and their life. She's passionate about these tools so that her clients may use them themselves in their daily lives, and they're practicing them every single day, enriching their own life and the lives of others. Sounds fascinating, doesn't it? Well, to learn more, Naomi's amazing work is going to be discussed right now as she joins me for this exclusive interview here in the Close-Up Television studios. Naomi, thanks so much for joining us here at Close-Up Television in the studio and coming all the way from Colorado to join us here on the East Coast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Jim.
Did you have a nice trip?
Yes, I did.
And I know you were all excited to come here and really expand a little bit more. We've had the radio show interviews on Close-Up Radio, which have been really fantastic and well received. We wanted to have you come to the TV studio so we can really explore and expand more, because I think what you do is so incredibly fascinating. I mean, it's so in tune with the understanding that people have of this work now. An intuitive healer, can you define for us what the work of an intuitive healer actually is?
Well, an intuitive healer basically uses their intuition to help guide them with the healing work. So someone can be a healer and not necessarily have the intuitive awareness, but I love that combination.
When did you realize, was there an aha moment, one of those sort of inspirational journey moments where you realized you had these abilities? Were these abilities something that you discovered in yourself, Naomi, or was it everybody else started saying there's something special that Naomi has? How'd that first develop, and when did you recognize it?
Well, I guess I've always had it. People would tell me, oh, I just feel better talking to you, or when you're around, or when I think of you, or whatever. And I just learned tools how to do it more consciously. Before I did it almost like an energetic sponge, which wasn't good for me, and just absorbing everybody's pain and things like that.
Yes.
And then I learned how to do it without that. So things have been much easier since then.
Tell us about the actual work. So people are watching, they're like, okay, an intuitive healer, what does that actually mean? I mean, they've probably heard of intuition, but maybe we can break it down in some examples of the actual work in application.
Well, basically, when someone comes in for healing, they usually say, I'm experiencing this health issue, or I'd like to shift things at work, or I'd like to shift things in a relationship, and then I hone in on the root cause of whatever's going on with them, and then look and see, okay, is their body ready to handle that? And as much as they're ready to handle, I just go in and shift the energy of the root cause.
Now, what are some of the ways that you do it? I know there's some really cool techniques that you use that help facilitate this, and you're sort of like the conduit, the facilitator yourself of this energy that's flowing through you and out to the client. What are some of the methods you use to make this happen?
Well, I can channel the healing energy through me, but as much as possible, I like to teach the person how to do it themselves. That way they don't have to rely on me to be there or anyone else. They can do it themselves.
Wow. So how do you go about doing that? So when somebody is, well, now because of technology advancements, I'm sure you're doing a lot with online. and you don't even have to be in the room with them, right? Now, this might be really fascinating for our viewers on close-up television. They probably think it's like this. We're one-on-one, we're across from each other, and you're able to maybe read me and feel certain energy and then work with that. But you can do this even when you're not in the same room with them or nowhere near them, right? I find that fascinating. Tell us about how that works.
Yes, well, if you believe in quantum physics, we can all influence each other, and I think at the root of it too, we're all drops of water in the same ocean. So it makes it easier when you work from that knowledge and that understanding. No wonder we can feel what the other person is feeling, or no wonder we can help someone shift their reality.
Wow, that's really amazing. So the sessions themselves, do you do like an initial assessment? How do you know what to apply and what to use based on the individual and whatever their needs are?
For the sessions themselves, I usually look at the root cause, and then I meditate on the root cause of the energies. And their very first session, I usually also have an astrological consultant, and then I work with her and confirm certain things, and she's really helpful. I started using her, and then I kept using her because you know, she's very helpful in many ways, including whatever you do, don't talk about this with them, you know, because when I first started, I would get so excited. Oh, the root cause of their health issues is their relationship with their mother, for example. And if they weren't ready to hear it, they would just shut down and then block off the healing energy. So.
Right, exactly, and that can be, right. And then once they're blocked, then you're not going to be able to really get anywhere and get where you need to be with them, which is really amazing. So you have sort of that consultant that sort of works with you and sort of guides the process a little bit too.
Yes.
You know, there's something really fascinating, and I think it's the very first time I've heard this, and that was when we did the radio show on Close Up Radio. And I'd love to expand on it further here with this interview, is the importance and what happens when you say hello to you. Define what that really means. Is it, I'm looking at it like we're always maybe going through life wearing masks, and I'm not talking about the pandemic, I'm just about masks in life.
Right.
And all the world is a stage. So we're different versions of ourselves based on the people we're with and the scenarios that we're involved in, and we don't necessarily get a chance to look in the mirror and see self and say hello to who you are authentically. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yes, when you say hello to who someone is, you're saying hello to their spirit is, and someone, whether they're conscious of it or not, whether they think they're something entirely different, their spirit knows and resonates with, oh yeah, that's me. But it's funny because sometimes people's egos or their resistance or their invalidation kind of argue, like, oh, that's not me, blah, 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 I'm not this. And then it's funny because 10 years later, 20 years later, sometimes people are like, you know what, I understand exactly what you were saying before, but it took me that long to work through the energy where I could really hear it, you know.
So when we say hello to who we are, the ideas of who we thought we were sort of alter and change, and that could go in many different directions, right? The versions that we have of who we aren't necessarily, like you're saying, coming from ourselves. It comes from society, it comes from parents and family and friends and teachers and just society in general, right? And sometimes we don't even realize who we are until you have those moments where you get to say hello. So it's crucial that we all do that.
Exactly.
Well, how did you do it? When did you say hello to Naomi?
Well, I've been doing this work for a long time, and you know, so I've practiced this consistently, but I think there are many ways that you can learn to say hello to yourself, even just journaling, unfiltered, whatever you think, and then you'll be like, oh, I think that, I feel that, and at first that's part of what it takes. And even sometimes, like, you know, when you look in the mirror, and most people might be like, oh, is my hair okay? Oh, my skin is whatever. Instead of, like, how often do you look in the mirror and look in your eyes and see, I am seeing a divine self. I am a divine being. I'm spirit in a body. And how often do we say hello to that?
Right, exactly. You know, you talk about also the divinity of love and of grace, and living in grace and living in the divinity of love. Tell us about that. How do we achieve that, and what is that really like? I mean, to me, it sounds like it's something extraordinary. If you're living in grace and you're living in the divinity of love, it's epic. But sometimes we don't know how to do that. Tell us about what it actually is.
Yeah. When we're living in the divinity of love, I think we're unconditionally loving ourselves and accepting ourselves as we are in that moment. We're not like, oh, I'm going to love myself if I lose 20 pounds, or I'm going to love myself if I get a raise, you know.
Which is what everybody does.
Exactly,
New Year's resolutions, and yes, buy the car, I'll be happier. And it doesn't work that way. That's fleeting.
Yes. So I think that's an important step. And also, so many times we show love the way that maybe our parents showed love. Like, oh, I'm going to show love by criticizing you because I want to help you be the best that you can. And that comes out of a love intention, but it doesn't feel that loving, especially to a kid that just wants to be loved for who they are in that moment.
You have a lot of different techniques that I think are fascinating as well. Something called the vibrations of love. Tell us about that.
Yeah, there are different techniques, for example, where I train people to ground out all the energies that's not love, and then I teach them how to raise their vibration and things like that, and that takes time. It's almost like a muscle, because, you know, we learn how to do all these things, lift weights or do math or whatever, but how often do we practice that spiritual muscle of just being the vibration of who we already are? And the more we start to do that, everything that's not us starts to fall away.
Wow. So just to give a little bit of a preview of how you do that, what is a way that you go about doing that? So you have, you know, the client, and you want to do this, the vibration of love. How do you go about it? How do you start with it?
If I'm doing it for them, I'd guide them in grounding and then releasing what's not them. And then sometimes, if they're new to the work, then I'll actually intend to shift their vibration, and they'll start raising their vibration. But it's funny too, because sometimes you'll feel people fight. They're
the resistance, as the wall is up.
Exactly. Yeah. Just let it go, and you know, and sometimes they can, sometimes it's difficult, but that's okay, because even in just doing it a little bit, or just trying it once or whatever, then it'll be easier the next time.
So are they doing physical maneuvers, or is it all vocal speech pattern? How is it actually working?
Sometimes it's physical, but it's more setting the intention of raising the vibration, and initially it just knocks people out. Like, a lot of times they'll just go unconscious.
Oh,
they'll
really?
start
Wow.
falling asleep.
Because they get so content and comfortable and at peace?
Well, it's interesting. Sometimes they pass out because they're completely at peace. Sometimes they pass out because as they're starting to raise their vibration, all the unconscious energy starts to come up and they just pass out. And it's okay. I remember when I was first starting this work, I went to a couple all-day workshops, and I passed out before it even started. And then I woke up at lunchtime when everyone was leaving. And then after I sat...
You passed out yourself?
Yes.
Wow.
And then after I sat down after lunch, I passed out again till the end. And I thought, my God, I paid a lot of money to pass out. But then when I looked at the energy, I'm like, oh, it's just all the unconscious energy releasing.
You do something else which I think is fascinating. It's called waveform inversion. What is that, Naomi?
Well, basically, I'll look at, if you look at energy signatures of certain things, it's similar to, for example, how they can use the technology to make a vacuum cleaner or a car less noisy, right? And
Yes,
then they
right.
take waveforms of sound that cancel it out, so that if you have the waveform of a vacuum cleaner that looks like this or whatever, you create something like this that cancels out and makes it quiet. So it's a similar thing where you're just creating energy to cancel out energy that already exists from trauma or depression or whatever it is that they would like to release.
Wow, I think that's absolutely fascinating. You do something else too, which it almost sounds like it maybe plays off of the waveform inversion, and it's deprogramming. So I've studied a little of this, and I think this is also fascinating because we are programmed early on, right? As soon as we come out of the womb, in a way, we are already being programmed culturally, societally, just with everything that we're absorbing, like sponges. And sometimes that programming doesn't always fit us. It doesn't always suit us well. It doesn't always bring out the authentic self or the true essence of who we are, right? So you do a deprogramming. Now that might sound very technological and robotic, like deprogramming a robot. It's not like that at all. Tell us about how it works.
There are a couple different deprogramming techniques that I use. One is if I want the person to have a more active awareness or consciousness around both the programming and the deprogramming, is I'll have them write down words they believe, like, oh, I'll never find love, I'll never meet my person, or something like that.
We hear people say that all the time.
Exactly, exactly. And then I'll have them write a new way that they'd like to program themselves. And it's interesting because the mind creates everything, and people, we get programmed by commercials or the media or family or teachers or whoever, and then people program themselves. Oh, I'm never going to heal. I'm never going to whatever. I'm always so stupid. I'm always so clumsy. And every time they think that, every time that they say that out loud or write it down, they're reinforcing that programming. And it's incredible.
It doesn't really work. You also do something called karma cleansing. First, define karma for us, because you always hear people use it when they say, well, that happened to that person because something that they did, and karma comes back, in your direction. But what is karma cleansing?
Well, when I look at karma, I look at more the lessons that we came to learn as spirit. So for example, maybe someone experienced a lot of difficult things in this lifetime, and people might go, oh, they have terrible karma or whatever.
Right.
But maybe they learned how to give meaning to suffering and help others who are doing that. So I think that we can't really use those kind of blanket statements. Karma is just basically soul lessons we came to learn.
Wow. So how do you go about doing that? Is it, again, is it a series of sessions that are several? I'm sure that a lot of these things don't happen in just one session or meeting or chat. It takes time, because sometimes I would imagine a lot of times people will be opening up to you and sharing things with you that they don't even share with their closest loved ones and friends, because you've established trust. You've established this safe zone for them to be able to remote and be so comfortable that they share things with you that, again, rise to the surface, and they've never dealt with it before or didn't even know it really existed.
So I teach people different exercises they can use to clear karma, not just with their partner, but whenever they're having a karmic situation in a relationship, or maybe they're like, oh, I keep giving my power away to my boss, to whomever.
You hear that a lot too.
Yes, exactly. So I'm like, okay, create some karma rings and break any agreements to give away your power. So I like to teach people exercises that they can apply to all areas of their life.
Then there is something else called spiritual surgery. That sounds deep, pun intended. What is spiritual surgery, and how's that work?
Spiritual surgery, the way I do it, I raise my vibration to a different vibration than the person that I'm working on, so that I can work on them a different way. There are all kinds of wild types of psychic surgery. For example, there are people who actually take knives and pull things out of people, pull energies or tumors or whatever. I've had psychic surgery done in Brazil at the Casa of Dominacio, where he actually scraped my eyes with a knife, and it was so interesting because I felt it, but it wasn't painful at all. But I could feel the scraping on my eyes. So
and what was it doing? What was it actually? Did you feel like you were having LASIK surgery or something? What was it actually doing for you? And what is different now that you're experiencing that maybe you weren't experiencing prior to having that done?
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like what was happening was they were clearing out a lot of energy that was affecting my health, but it wasn't even just my physical health, because everything's tied, everything's energy.
It's all, mind, body, spirit.
Yeah.
So now you don't do that. You do much more of a, tell us a little bit about how you do what you do.
Yeah, I don't do that because, one, I don't want to be carted to jail.
No,
it's
that's
not
a
legal
whole other,
in this country.
that's not your thing.
Yeah,
right?
So I do it in a way where I shift my vibration, and then I work on people. And it was interesting because when I first started working on people, sometimes I wouldn't even be touching them and they'd be screaming in pain. I'm like, oh no, this is not good.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because then I went to a work, I'm like, I'm missing one piece of something.
Yeah.
And then I went to a workshop with one of my teachers, and he's like, psychic anesthesia. Oh, psychic anesthesia.
Oh, so what is that?
And it's just energetic anesthesia. And once I did that, they were comfortable. Sometimes they could feel it, but it wasn't painful.
I see. Yeah, so as opposed to just like if we were to go for any surgery, we have the anesthesia to sort of numb, and so we don't feel what they actually have to do. So in this case, with the spiritual surgery, there is a psychic anesthesia that you can apply.
Exactly.
That sort of lessens any of that.
Yes.
So you can do what you need to do.
Yes, you can create the psychic anesthesia. But at first when I was starting, I just had this picture, which is a belief that's not actually true. I had this picture, well, with psychic surgery or spiritual surgery, you wouldn't need anesthesia. But actually, you do. It's just like a spiritual anesthesia. So you do need that component, even though you're working on the spirit body.
Is there anything that you won't do for a client that they may request just because it's just not something you do or want to do or believe in, or it might be not beneficial for them? Tell us about that.
Yes, I don't do anything that affects people's free will. A lot of times people come to me and they're like, oh, my partner left me, can you do a love spell? I'm like, I could, but I'm not going to, because I don't do anything that affects people's free will, and even if I did something like that, they're not getting the lessons of whatever happened, and they're accruing karma, not in a good way, by trying to control someone's behavior. And I even worked with a corporate client who had me working on this project, and it was a secret project for his company, and he said, oh, would you work on, I think it was maybe 6 of his team members, and then 4 of them actually quit, wanted to quit soon after that, and he's like, what did you tell them? And I said, oh, just release anything that no longer serves you. And then they gave notice, and he's like, I hired you to mold.
They released working there.
Yes, and he said, I hired you to mold people to my will. And I said, but that's against everything I believe in.
It's about, right? Yeah. It's the opposite of that. It's being authentic self.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Speaking of self and things we go through in our lives, you're a cancer survivor as well. Tell us about that and how that sort of influence the work that you're doing as well.
Yes, I was given a 7% chance of survival. About
7%.
Yeah, about 7 17 years ago from a rare and aggressive type of cancer. And that was a great teaching for me, and it was an important process, part of my process as a healer, to move out that energy, and also to move out the energy so I could raise my vibration in a different way, that holding that old energy was blocking me. And it was also an important lesson for me, because cancer and any kind of autoimmune diseases is basically anti-self energy. Yeah. And we're kind of raised in anti-self energy.
We are.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's so interesting, because it's not like, well, what makes you happy, or, you know, what do you want to wear that makes you happy or expresses yourself? How will people think of you if you wear this or whatever? And so addressing that anti-self energy was really important for my own process, and something that I help a lot of people with.
Do they attribute some of that to stress too? I know there's a big connection between, you know, diet, lifestyle, all the rest, genetics, family history, but stress can really be, and we're living in a very stressful, fast-paced, unpredictable world now. Everything's faster and faster, and everything, you know, you turn on the news and one thing is more dramatic than it was 5 minutes ago. Is stress something that we really need to manage? And stress can also be good because it can get you motivated if it's you know, handled in a way that it's productive. But stress can also trigger things that we don't need or want in our lives, right?
Right. I think it's important to manage it, and maybe to utilize useful stress and get rid of causes of not useful stress. Like, a lot of people just sit around invalidating themselves all the time, or worry what other people think about themselves, which is very stressful and not really necessary.
What do you think are a few things for people to really understand and appreciate about healing and intuitive reading?
I think one thing that's important to understand is it's not fortune telling. A lot of people are like, tell me what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I never tell the future, because every choice we make changes our future. And I think people need to understand that healing is an interactive process. Just like you can go to the best surgeon in the world, you can go to the best teacher, but if you're not going to do the homework, if you're not going to do your rehabilitation exercises or whatever, you're not going to get the most out of that experience. And likewise, healing is a very interactive process. So it's important to have your power in that healing process.
That's so important too, because a lot of times people don't realize the importance of that. Do you find when you are working with a client for the very first time, are they sometimes resistant because this is all new information for them? Some people may never have really looked at themselves this deeply, or have allowed themselves to delve in this deeply. So you have different clients that come to you for a lot of different reasons. It's not one size fits all or cookie cutter, but do you have sometimes some people who are prove it, like, you know, they're resistant, like, okay, let's see if this, what is this about? How's this really going to work for me? How do you work with folks like that?
Yes. Some people definitely are resistant, and it's interesting, because sometimes it's interesting. It depends on the person and the situation, but some people, when they're in that prove-it energy, I'll just mention something that they probably never shared and stuff, and it's like the wall comes down. And then sometimes I get from spirit, don't do it, because you're buying into that, you're feeding that prove-it energy that's going to keep them stuck in a cycle.
Yes, and when we're stuck in a cycle, again, our growth is stunted, right? We're not able to absorb anymore. Sometimes we don't want to listen to any other viewpoints or opinions. You see a lot of that now. People just want to surround themselves with the views and ideas and thoughts that reinforce whatever it is they're thinking now, even if they don't have all the facts, all the real information. It's just that they want to be surrounded by that because it's more comforting for them. So being open and allowing yourself to expand is really important, right?
Exactly, yeah. And another thing with that that prove it energy too. Is you know like, prove it, and then you prove whatever that you know what you're talking about, and then they go along and then they're like, prove it again, prove it
Keep
again.
proving it, yeah.
And I've heard from different gurus and things like that they just stopped manifesting miracles and stuff, because it's like they'll manifest objects out of thin air and people are like, oh, and their minds are blown. And then they'll go along and they're like, well, now prove it again, you know, and they're like, it's
forever,
not about that.
right.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah. So it could be a challenge, but you take on the challenge. You enjoy a good challenge, right? Because it's fascinating for you.
Yeah, I enjoy a good challenge as long as they really want to grow. If someone's serious about the growth, about the learning and stuff like that, I love it. It's so rewarding.
One of the things, and this is sort of going back full circle a little bit here to what we talked about in the beginning, was your desire to want to teach others to do a lot of this, to not only appreciate it, but to apply it to their own lives for the times when Naomi's not in the room or not on Zoom or not on the phone or whatever it may be, to learn and absorb what you've learned and to be able to apply it, you know, from day to day when they need to call upon some of those teachings that you've, you know, imparted in their direction. Tell us about that.
Yes, I love sharing what I know, and it's so gratifying to see my students teach others or eventually go on to have their own classes, or just role modeling for people in their family or community or friends, and the changes that start to catch on by watching that is very powerful.
There's something, Naomi, that is absolutely fascinating, and I don't know how you do it. Maybe you can explain a little bit. You have the ability to do readings while people are sleeping. How, without even really, you know, being there, how does this work?
Yeah, I just look at the energy, same as if someone was sitting in front of me. And some clients I've had, I've never talked to them at all. I just know their name, and they email me questions and say, oh, I'm in this relationship, or I'm struggling at work. What do I need to do? And I read the energy, and actually, you know, because energy is energy, you can be anywhere. They can be sleeping or whatever, and it's similar. And it's actually, I teach my students how to read at first remotely, so they just have the name and the question. Wow. And it's easier because sometimes when people are there in person and they know when it's happening, they're like, oh, look at this, see this, yeah. Even though it's not even true, you know, but they want you to say, oh, yes, this person is the right person for me, or whatever. Oh, I don't need to change anything. I'm just...
Right. They're being told what they want to hear,
exactly.
Which doesn't benefit them.
Exactly.
So you'll be open and honest with them, because that will benefit them, which I think is a beautiful part of what you do and why you do what you do. The sessions themselves, maybe take us through, if somebody is a brand new client coming to you for whatever reason they're coming to you, what is a session like initially? What do you look for? Are you sort of reading them and listening to them right at the outset?
Usually I have them email me with what they'd like to work on. Not that I even necessarily need it, but it helps them be more conscious and helps them set the intention for the session. And if they do that, we can go deeper, because if it's a general question, then the information is more general. If it's a very specific question, then I can go deep into that pocket of energy.
Now, are there multiple sessions? I think we would touch upon that a little bit. Maybe we can expand on it. That a lot of this wouldn't be done in just one fell swoop in one particular session. You can do a variety of different sessions. And do you also have people who you've worked with them on this, but now they need some work on this? And are there sort of like tune-up maintenance? You know how you go and you have your car tuned up? You don't have it rebuilt, but you have it tuned up. Are there like tune-ups that you do as well?
Yeah, it depends what they're ready for. Sometimes people call me just when they're having a crisis or need help. sometimes if they want to work on a specific area, like success at work or whatever, it might be more regular, like every month or something like that. I discourage people in general from contacting me too often if it's unless they're doing the work themselves. Like if they're studying how to do it themselves, then I'll do it as part of their education, but I don't like people to get energetically dependent on me, because then they don't have a chance to learn how much power they have and how they can use the tools for themselves. So, but I do work with people regularly if they're working with things like, a serious life-threatening illness or different attacks and things like that that need more continuous help.
If you can, give us some examples of, and again, as I said, it's not, cookie cutter approach. People come to you for a variety of different reasons, but give us a couple of different examples of what some of the clients struggle with. What are some of their frustrations? What are some of the things they're dealing with? Obviously, the last couple of years of our lives have thrown, with the pandemic and everything, it's thrown a whole new twist of different things in our direction we've had to deal with. What are generally some of the things that you see people coming to you for?
A lot of relationship readings and healings, how to take things to the next level in their career, certain like actors or celebrities or whatever, they might ask like, okay, is this role good for me? Should I go for this? Should I go for this? But those kinds of things. So a lot just about taking things to the next level. Some of my clients who are corporate have me do a lot on hiring, actually, HR stuff. It's interesting. I remember one time I was in Albuquerque. No, I was in Angel Fire, New Mexico, and this guy came to me and he had a company, and he was a scientist. He was a genius, actually, and he gave me about 100 names, and he's like, tell me about these people. And most of them like, oh, fine, good, blah, blah, blah. But there were two that were...
Stood out?
Yeah, and one of them I said, don't let this person in your workplace, don't let them in your home, don't leave them unattended, do not hire them, whatever. And then at the end he said, I actually knew about all the people, I just wanted to see if you were good.
To see if you, right, so he was testing you to make sure.
Yeah, and it was interesting because he told me the one that I said, do not let him anywhere near your stuff, he actually had been someone who filed paperwork as his own invention, stealing the intellectual property from this other person, and he's like, "Oh, you are good." So he, hired. Yeah.
Do you come across people sometimes where the energy and the vibe is really dark, sinister, not good, unhealthy, threatening? Any of these things? Where not only is it a challenge for you, but it sort of, you step back a little bit. How do you deal with that? And is there ever a time where that energy is so negative and so strong you won't deal with that? Or do you just take on anything, even if their energy is really coming from a dark place?
Yeah. One situation, and I think I mentioned that in the interview with Doug too, but I was at this office in New York working for this guy who had a company and this other passion project that he was working on, and this man came in and I just was like this because he looked like a monster, and I'm like, who's that guy? And he's like, oh, he works for me or whatever. But then it turned out he was actually a lawyer for the mob, and then it was interesting too because he's like, but I feel like he'll take care of me and they'll take care of me like their little brother or something like that, and he insisted on hiring this other guy who was unethical, and I said, if he works for you, I can't be involved in this because I told you this guy is unethical, and I can't work for you if you're not going to follow ethical business practices. And he goes, oh, I haven't talked to him at all since that. And I go, well, I see that you've not only talk to him, but you've already got something in the works with him. And he's like this because...
So how do you know that?
Yeah, he hired me to know, to look at the energy of his business, so I saw it. And then after that, he instructed all of his people that he had hired me for the month. He's like, don't speak to her at all. If you must speak to her, just say hi and quickly run away after that. So it was really interesting that he hired me to look at the energy, and then was shocked because I was looking at the energy.
Because you were really... do you ever have sometimes where you do that with people, and in the beginning they're trying to put that facade on, but then they realize that it's not working with you because you've already got their number, you've got them figured out already?
Yeah, and sometimes they run away, sometimes for years until they're really ready to look at it. And it was funny, one woman disappeared for years and then came back, and she's like, I didn't want to believe the things you said, even though I kind of knew they were right. And then she went and hid for some years and then came back and was ready to look at things, which is important, because how can we change what we're creating unless we look at how it is now?
Is it sometimes too painful? Is that why they run away? It's you've revealed something that maybe for a long time I've tried to hide, or I've tried to just not allow people to see?
Yeah, sometimes it's, we spend our whole life squishing pain in or whatever, and in order to heal it, it has to come up. So that's something. Another thing is sometimes people want to believe a certain thing, whether it's accurate or not, and they don't really want to hear anything that contradicts their fantasy or whatever.
Right, whatever their narrative is, which might not be an accurate one. What are some other examples of the work in application? Maybe case studies.
Well, let's see. I know when I worked with people, whether it's for career or relationships, I'll look at the energies, including patterns they've emulated from their parents, for example, or low self-worth and things like that that are affecting how other people treat them. And then so they'll start doing the work and be like, whoa, this really works. Or even, for example, maybe people are having difficulties with a challenging boss or coworkers, and I'll teach them techniques how to communicate spirit to spirit, and then they'll say the next day they show up at work and it was completely different. And sometimes that can happen too, but it depends, because some people are willing to shift too, as some people won't shift no matter what, but we have to be okay with the energy and move forward whether that person does or not.
Does mindfulness come into any of this?
Yeah, mindfulness is very key. Awareness is very important. Some people are like, oh, awareness is ego, awareness doesn't matter. But if you're not aware, that means you're unaware. And there are so many unconscious energies, and people are largely ruled by energies they're not conscious of. So if that's the case, what are you really allowing to prevent you from living who you really are?
I would imagine you get a chance to see some absolutely extraordinary things before your eyes, or sometimes, again, you're not even in the room with them, where their lives have just changed in such a profound way.
Yes.
That must be extraordinary for you.
I love it. I love it. That's why I do this work.
You also taught at university, too, for a number of years, right?
Yes.
Tell us about that before really jumping into this in the full swing mode that you have.
Yeah, I used to teach at the University of Colorado, research and writing, and some other classes. I also taught some other places, talented and gifted creative writing, journalism at the community colleges, and I did a literary and arts nonprofit organization, and we published incredible writers like Isabella Allende, Allen Ginsberg, Robert Bly, Sherman Alexie, so.
So you enjoyed that?
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it, but it was killing me basically, because I put so much work into it, and it was interesting because my my office manager, she called me. She's like, I just had a revelation. And I said, what's your revelation? And she said, you need to quit or you're going to die.
And this is before the cancer?
Before I knew about it. And I thought about, I'm like, I need to meditate on that. And I did. And I'm like, she's right. And so, so I quit. And I think had I not quit, I probably would have been dead.
Yeah, that's amazing. Boy, good thing you did, huh?
Yeah.
You also have these really cool workshops called Living a Life of Love. Let's talk about that.
Okay. Yeah, living a life of love, I talk about the energies that affect your ability to live a life of love. And living a life of love starts around the foundation of loving yourself. So a lot of people, maybe they don't love themselves and they're constantly seeking love from the external, but what kind of people do they attract if they don't really love themselves? So, and it's a repeating cycle. So we start by looking at that, and living a life of love comes through in everything you do, whether you're a writer or artist or teacher or the work you do, you know. Yeah.
So when did you realize you were living a life of love?
Well, I think I'm a work in progress.
Like we all are, right?
Yeah.
So many teachable moments in life.
Yeah, but I feel like I've shifted so much over the years doing this work. I remember being a kid and just feeling like basically I had no right to take up space, to use air. I couldn't speak to anyone, just like this little shriveled flower or something. And, and I feel like, well, I'm doing something right because I'm here talking to you about stuff I love and, and other cool people. And I just love this work so much, and I'm able to share it with people. So I feel like that's the work I'm doing shows up in my life in so many ways.
You're living your purpose. You've tapped into your purpose, and you're living it in a profound way by inspiring, empowering others to recognize it in themselves.
Yes.
How much of a lot of the way we think and the way we operate is not only societal, but cultural and upbringing and traditions that sometimes sort of create that molding, that programming early on, that sometimes we need to sort of peel back a little bit, the layers of, as time goes on in our lives?
Yeah, I think so much of it is cultural, whether it's family culture or country culture or whatever. And especially what we witnessed in our parents, and like a lot of parents, they love their kids and they do the best that they can, but maybe they don't know how to show love. Like I know it was really big. This guy like hugged his dad and told him he loved him, and it was so healing for them because the dad, like, of course he loved him, but he didn't know how to show it in his heart or with words or anything. And when you break open that gate to expressing what you have in your heart, it's really quite a beautiful thing.
There's also something called Embodying Your Divinity. Tell us about that.
Yes, that's a 9-month class that I do weekly, and we really go deep. We deprogram, we do a lot of different healing techniques. We cover specific topics like communication, relationship, etc.
That's fantastic. So if somebody's watching right now and they're really fascinated by what we're talking about, but they just don't know what to do next, where to begin, how to take that first step. I always say one of the greatest, we invest in a lot of different things in our lives, but one of the greatest investments that we could ever make is in ourselves.
Absolutely.
Because when we learn to put the oxygen mask, and I've had to learn how to do that too, put the oxygen mask on ourselves, and then we can put it on others and help others, glorious things happen. So if folks are watching and they're saying, this sounds really fascinating, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to explore. I think I'm ready to open up and to really look at life in a more interesting way, a more fascinating way, a deeper dive into who the person is. Like you say, living, the grace and love and all of these things we talk about, but sometimes life gets in the way and we don't apply what we wish, what's some of the first things that they should do if they're on the fence about doing it?
They are welcome to contact me if they have any questions, or just sit and meditate on what's right for you. Maybe it's not the right time, or maybe you need something else, but just noticing too, like any resistance that comes up either way, and then just get neutral, and from that neutral space, feel into what's right for you.
Now, are there certain age groups that you work with, or do you work with adults? Do you work with children as well? How does that work?
I have a youth class, which is $1, and if kids don't have money for the class, then they can do an extra chore at home in exchange for their tuition or whatever, and that's from about age 10 and up and stuff. But I work with all different ages.
Wow, that's fantastic. And what about as far as individuals, group settings, corporations?
Well, corporations generally contact me to work with either the corporation at large or specific individuals, or sometimes they have like their management alone just come for work, and and I work with families, couples, individuals.
Why do you love this work so much? Obviously, it's bringing great blessing and joy to your life. You've had your own life's journey, your life's experience. You're continuing it. You've had good times and not so good times, and have come out of it still wanting to inspire and empower others, which I think is an absolutely beautiful thing. Because sometimes, when people have things happen to them in their lives, they do turn the other way and they run from the fire. They pull the shades down. They don't want to get involved. You tend to be somebody, from the energy I'm getting, likes to run towards it because you've been in it yourself. So you want to be able to show people how they too can get through the challenges of life, whether they're challenges that we've created ourselves or that are thrust upon us from world events or just relationships with people. These are blessings and joys that you've learned, that you really have harnessed, and are quite beautiful. What are some of the other blessings and joys that propel you forward to do this work, Naomi?
Yeah, basically seeing the transformation, and in our individual lives, in our relationships, even things like relationship to money or our bodies or health,
Yes.
etc. So much can change, but it does require, as you mentioned, that going within, and that takes a lot of courage, because if someone's been working their whole life not to deal with stuff, then it takes courage to pull things out, and it's not always fun. But once you do it, you can transform everything. You can't just keep squishing things down, otherwise you start to get buried.
It's like a pot of boiling water that will eventually explode. The other thing too, which you just touched upon briefly, I mentioned in the introduction too, is, and let's talk maybe briefly about some of the benefits of this actual work. Benefits, people like to hear about things that are relatable. So you mentioned, it can help with relationships, with health, with finances. Let's talk about finances. How can this work and the understanding of this actually help with something like finances?
Yes, well, finances and love actually are a lot related to self-worth. So working on those things, and I've worked with people over time, and they said it's amazing. They're making what they never imagined, or got promotions beyond what they ever thought they were capable, or their relationships changed dramatically, or they broke up an old relationship and met someone that could really honor and love them for who they are. So yeah, I think it can be huge.
And health too. Of course, you talked about your situation. It can really help with maintaining a healthy lifestyle, and just mental, spiritual, and physical health, because again, they're all interwoven, interconnected, right?
Yes, with health, it can help too, and I think it's just like anything. The quicker you address it when things start to get off balance, the easier it is to adjust your health. Just like, for example, if someone waits till they have stage 4 cancer when all along they'd been feeling these symptoms, then it's much more difficult to heal. Not impossible. I've seen people on death's door suddenly, be healed and stuff like that. So it really depends. But I think for most people, it helps like just to kind of keep things on balance and stay on course and just address things and clean out the energy as it comes up instead of storing it inside of us.
What would you say to somebody right now who might be going through a very rough time, either personally, professionally, health, relationship, loss, whatever it may be, or all of the above? And sometimes all of the above does happen to us, and it becomes overwhelming and sometimes very difficult to handle. What would be a message for somebody watching right now who is experiencing those things, but they don't know how to put one foot in front of the other because they feel so overwhelmed, consumed, and just completely down as a result of everything that's been going on?
Yeah, I think that's quite a common issue, especially for kind, compassionate, empathic people.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And what's going on?
Are you reading me? You're reading me.
Well, I like that you recognize yourself in that because you are exactly like kind, compassionate, and empathetic. And just to remember that you're not alone in that, because I think so many people feel like, oh God, I'm the only one, I'm a loser and whatever. But so many people are feeling that same thing, and when we can be there for each other in different ways, and also to keep in mind everything changes. So as awful as you may feel right now, keep going, and there's definitely hope.
I agree. Yeah, there really, and that's the key. Like, that's very important. You said there's hope. Always think that there's hope, because when you lose hope, then all bets are off. But always look, and you're able to. One of the cool things you do, Naomi, is help people sort of get in touch and reconnected to hope. Because I'm sure you've dealt with some people who feel like hope is gone, and you've been able to help them sort of plug back into it. And once you're plugged back into hope, then other things result that are very positive, right?
Exactly. And in addition to hope, I think it's about re-owning our power to create, because everything starts with the mind, like I said. So, there were horrible studies they talked about during the Nuremberg trials where people got hooked up to saline solution and said, oh, by the time that's empty, you're going to be dead. And most of them were dead. And on the other hand, you have people who went through horrible accidents, were paralyzed, and the doctor's like, oh, you're never going to walk again. But then they're walking, they're dancing, they're whatever, doing all kinds of things. So, owning that ability to create and just taking it one step at a time. You don't have to have the whole thing figured out, but one positive step at a time and keep going can make a huge difference. And of course, like this work, like say someone has cancer, and I would never say, oh yeah, you'll be fine. I don't know that. That's between them and divinity and stuff like that. But even no matter, and it depends on kind of what their spirit wanted to learn and experience in this lifetime, which I can't take away from anybody. But there are things like, even if someone does pass away from cancer, they can come to learn to love themselves more. They can learn different ways to honor themselves more, and they don't have to relearn that in a different lifetime.
That's really beautiful. It's beautiful work that you're doing. It's life-changing on many levels. It's impactful on many levels. And again, it really ties everything up so neatly with the understanding of the divinity of love, and understanding, embodying it really in a way that allows you to then, as you teach them how to do it, then they pay it forward. And wouldn't it be great if the whole world sort of, and we could use a dose or two of this about now, right?
Yes, and I think that's an important thing for people to remember too, like how much they can change people's lives or make things better just by maybe they held the door open for someone who had a toddler and bags of groceries, and they're like, oh, thank God, you know, and there's, everyone has the power to help in some way, even if it's just smiling at someone or asking how they are.
Well, you're doing that all the time, Naomi, and it's extraordinary work. And I mentioned too, holdinglightproductions.com, and Holding Light Productions is the company, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's fantastic.
Thank you. So
you love this, and it shines. You radiate that energy and that hope and that passion. And this is really fantastic. I learned a lot. I mean, from our radio interviews on Close Up Radio, I already had a great sense of what you do, but you're coming here to the television studio and expanding on that further has really been eye-opening, and I hope for our viewers as well watching, they will put that one foot in front of the other and make contact with you and learn more about all the great offerings. Continued success. This was really fantastic. I hope you enjoyed the time with me as much as I certainly have with you, Naomi.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jim. It was such an honor to be on your show, and you're a beautiful spirit with beautiful energy, so it was additionally a pleasure.
I appreciate that very much. I appreciate that. My father has always said whenever anybody says something kind and nice to you, they please put that in writing and address it in management. So, that's the other thing too, you got to laugh, right? You have to laugh because life can really, you know, come at you in different ways, and I like to add a little levity in because it sort of breaks the ice, and you know, it's a great equalizer too. Thanks for spending all this time with us. Really an honor and a pleasure, and I wish you continued joy and success and blessing in your life, and we hope to have you back again.
Thank you so much, Jim.
You're very welcome. As you can see, Naomi is very passionate about her work. Now, if you'd like to learn more, visit this website, holdinglightproductions.com. For Close Up Television and Radio, I'm Jim Masters. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.